Hi guys, welcome back to part 4 of my prison series about me being in prison with Susan Smith in Greenwood, South Carolina at Leith Correctional Facility from 2011 and 2012. And even though I've titled it that I went to prison with Susan Smith, this is going to be about my experiences at this point because I have some pretty interesting ones. First of all, hello to all my new followers. I had zero idea this series was going to take off. I've gotten about 4,000 new followers in the last 24 hours. So I'm trying to get to everybody's comments and put out as many videos as I can about what my experience was like. So while I was in county jail, I got really nervous about prison, but there were some OGs in jail with me, and they were like, "You're going to love prison because it's like a lesbian playground." Because I'll be honest, I really struggled while I was in county. Now, mind you, I had a wonderful upbringing. My grandparents raised me. My grandparents were amazing. I had all of the opportunities and privileges in the world. I went to private Catholic school. I was a straight A student. I was involved in sports. I was the number one basketball player for the private school, the South Carolina Independent School Association. I was the number one basketball player from the years 1996 to 1999. So that's just to show you that addiction does not discriminate. Her name was Tracy, and she told me, she was like, when you get to prison, she's like, you have more freedom. Funny, you have more freedom in prison? That doesn't make sense. It does. Once you get to prison, you really do have a lot more freedom than in county jail. But the best advice she gave me was, do your time, don't let the time do you. I was one of those that had this misconception of prison that once you get to the yard, you got to show your dominance and blah, 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 and all. No, that's not how prison is. When I got there, I cannot tell you how nice the girls were to me. Now, a lot of people told me that's because I was a mass coming into a women's prison. But like I said, when I got there, everybody was super, super, super nice to me. And when I got to prison, that's when I decided I was going to take advantage of everything that they had to offer. Because you know what? They did have programs there. Not the best. South Carolina is a shitty state when it comes to rehabilitation. But I swore that I was going to get the most out of my time in prison. And by God, I did. So I wasn't required to do any kind of drug treatment, but there's the star of the show. He's coming. I wasn't required to, or wasn't sentenced to do any treatment, but the rumor was if you went to WRA, which was Women's Recovery Academy, and successfully completed it, that when you went up for parole, your chances of getting parole were a lot higher. However, nobody that had been terminated from drug court in Greenville County had ever received parole. Anyway, there was a waiting list to get into WRA because the people that were sentenced to it got priority. So I was in Cambridge so I got there in November and ended up going into WRA in December. So I had about 6 weeks to get to know Birdie, who obviously was my girlfriend in prison. So relationships in women's prisons are usually just while you stay there. It's a way to pass the time. It's a way to have some sort of intimacy that you're not getting, or that you normally get on the outside. And that's why a lot of women are gay for the stay. But I was truly looking for a relationship. I probably shouldn't have been. I probably should have focused completely on me in prison, which I did focus on myself, but I also focused on Birdie and her tractor. Birdie was a hard one to crack, though. She wasn't looking for some just, gay for the stay relationship. She was actually interested in a relationship. So we got to know each other like you would kind of get to know each other back in like the 50s. Like we wrote notes to each other every day. We would sit at the table and talk every day. We would go on rec every day. Just would talk for hours and hours and hours. And like we developed this amazing relationship that lasted the entire time that I was in prison. And then when I got out, I made parole. When I got out, she still had 20 months left. And I stood by her side the entire time. I made sure she had money on her books. I made sure she had money on the phone to call not only me, but her kids, her mom, her dad, all of that. Absolutely 100% stood by her side, and I was with her parents to pick her up when she got out of prison in 2014. But I panicked 90 days before she got out because I let people get in my ear about once people get out of prison that say that they're gay, will break up with you and end up going back to a man. So I let people get into my head really bad about that, and I ended up going on Plenty of Fish to find a friend, and I found a friend. I had convinced myself she was just going to leave me once she got out, and I had invested literally almost $40,000 in the 20 months that I had been with her. So I met this girl off of Plenty of Fish, we'll call her Leslie, and went up to hang out with her, and so now I was juggling a girlfriend in prison and a girlfriend on the outside. I'm not a hoe, by the way, at all. Like, I've never cheated on a partner up until that point. So I was feeling pretty shitty about myself. But then when Birdie got out, she made it known that she really wanted to be with me and nobody else. And I felt like an entire piece of shit. And I told her about Leslie, and she still wanted to work things out. And I still got scared, and I went back to Leslie. I even got this tattoo. This was our anniversary date after I got out of prison. Anyway, I ended up single shortly after that, and I kind of lost it and had a mental breakdown and did not do well for several years until I got pregnant with my daughter in 2016. Now, that's a story for another TikTok about how I got pregnant with my daughter by putting an ad on Craigslist Backpage. Anyway, so after 6 months, I completed the drug treatment program, and I was put back out on the regular yard, and Birdie and I continued our relationship inside prison. But yeah, so that's kind of what went on with Birdie and I. There's obviously more stories than that, and we never did anything in prison, which I did not want to get in trouble. I wanted to do my time and go home because I had a grandfather that was sick. And this was hard on my grandparents. So I just wanted to get home. So I went up for parole, and I honestly wasn't expecting it because, like I said, nobody that had been terminated from drug court in Greenville County had ever gotten parole. So my grandparents were at the parole hearing with me, and I made parole. And I was released 21 days later. And funny story about parole in South Carolina. So when you make parole in South Carolina, you're not like immediately released. Like you have to, it's a process, and it takes a couple of weeks. So you go back to the prison and you just wait. You're waiting to be processed out of the system. And literally the day before you get released, they come and get you, or they call you to operations and they hand you your paperwork, your pink slips, and you got to go get everything signed. So they called me to operations on September 12th. Of 2012, and she said, "You're being released tomorrow on September 13th. That was my 30th birthday. So at 8 a.m., September 13th, 2012, I walked out of the front gates of prison to my grandmother who was waiting for me, and then I went home. Anyway, I definitely have more stories. If you have more questions, drop them in the comments. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you for all the love and the support, and welcome to my page.